Hey everyone, so if you're getting into Retrieval-Augmented Generation, RAG, there's one step that is absolutely crucial: chunking. Seriously, if you get this part right, your AI can feel like magic. But if you get it wrong, well, it just falls flat. Today, we're going to learn how to get it right.
Okay, think about this for a second. How do you teach a machine to read an entire book? You can't just stuff the whole thing in there at once. Large language models have limits, right? They have a finite attention span, just like us. So how do you break that book down into pieces the machine can actually digest and learn from? That, right there, is the fundamental challenge we're talking about.
And the answer to that challenge is a process called chunking. Simply put, it's all about breaking down huge amounts of text into smaller, meaningful segments. You can almost think of it like you're creating really good study notes for your AI. The whole point of these chunks is to help the model hold on to information and just work way more efficiently.
So why is this so critical? I mean, really, what's the big deal? Well, for starters, every LLM has a context window. That's a hard limit on how much text it can process at one time. But it's more than just that. Good chunking means you get more accurate, more relevant answers. It speeds things up, and maybe most importantly, it helps you avoid this classic lost-in-the-middle problem, where an AI can literally forget key info if it's buried in a super long document. It's all about keeping related ideas together.
Okay, so we know why we have to chunk. Now, let's dive into the how. We're going to start with the most basic, simple cut. Then we'll move on to a more natural, sentence-based approach. And after that, we'll get into the really smart stuff with a recursive strategy. And finally, we'll wrap it all up so you can figure out which method is the perfect one for your project.
All right, let's start with the most straightforward approach out there, fixed-size chunking. This is pretty much the first method every developer tries, mostly because it's just so simple. Let's go back to our book analogy, but this time, imagine you've got a pair of scissors. Fixed-size chunking is like deciding, I'm going to make a cut every 500 words, period. You don't care if you're in the middle of a sentence, you don't care if you're slicing a word right in half. It's a simple, no-nonsense, brute force approach. So the trade-off here is pretty obvious, right? On the one hand, this method is super simple and incredibly fast. You get these nice predictable chunk sizes that are easy to work with. But, and this is a big but, the downside is huge. It has zero respect for the meaning of the text. You're going to break sentences, you're going to lose crucial context, and you could seriously hurt your model's ability to find the right information.
Because just blindly chopping up text can cause so many problems, the next logical step is to add a little more intelligence to our process. And that brings us to sentence-based chunking.
Okay, back to our book. Instead of just cutting every 500 words, now we're going to be a little bit smarter. We're going to decide to only make a cut at the end of a sentence. So at a period, a question mark, you get the idea. We're actually respecting the natural boundaries and flow of the language.
The pros here are pretty great. Every single chunk is a complete thought, right? That preserves readability, and the segments are nicely self-contained. The downside? Well, sentences can be really short or really long, so your chunk sizes are going to be all over the place. And more importantly, while it understands sentences, it doesn't get the bigger picture, like paragraphs or sections, so you might miss out on deeper connections between ideas.
So, if fixed size is too simple and sentence-based is still a bit limited, how do we get the best of both worlds? Well, this brings us to what I think is our smartest strategy: recursive chunking.
Okay, this is the most thoughtful cut of them all. Instead of just having one rule, we have a whole hierarchy of rules. We start by trying to split the book by chapters. But if a chapter is just too big for our model, we then try splitting that chapter by paragraphs. And if a single paragraph is still too big, only then do we fall back to splitting it by sentences. It's a really adaptive, structure-aware approach.
The logic here basically works like a waterfall. The process tries to split the text using a list of separators that you give it, starting with the biggest, most meaningful one, like a paragraph break. If the chunks it creates are still too large, it just falls back to the next separator on the list, like a sentence break, and it keeps doing that until the chunks finally fit your size limit.
So this method is incredibly powerful because it preserves the document structure, it's flexible, it's adaptive, and it avoids all those awkward, unnatural breaks you get with fixed-size chunking. So what's the catch? Well, it is more complex to set up, and its success really depends on having a well-formatted document to start with. If your text is just a giant wall of words, this method kind of loses its magic.
All right, we've looked at three really distinct strategies. Now, for the most important part, how do you, as a developer, actually choose which one to start with? Here is your cheat sheet.
If you just need raw speed or you're dealing with really messy, unstructured text, start with fixed size. If you're working with narrative content like articles or stories, go with sentence-based to keep that natural flow. And for any kind of structured document, think technical manuals, code, reports. Recursive is your most powerful option for getting that high-level context awareness.
You know what? Let's make this even simpler. Here is your developer starter kit. If you are just starting your very first RAG project and you need something that just works right now, go with fixed size. If your content reads like a book or an article, start with sentence-based. But if your document has clear headings, paragraphs, and sections, taking the extra time to implement recursive chunking will almost always give you better, more contextually accurate results. It's worth it.
So we've explored how to set all these different rules for slicing up our documents, but the real cutting edge of chunking is moving way beyond these fixed rules. The big question people are asking now is this: what if the AI itself could analyze the meaning of the text and decide the most logical places to make a cut all on its own? Now that is where things start to get really, really exciting.